Hello, all you hardcore boxing fans out there. How are you doing? It's Russ here from Porky's Corner, the voice of hardcore boxing. Today I'm joined by my good friend Julian from Dewsbury, professional trainer to various trainers and various fighters and ex-fighters. How are you doing, Julian?
Good, mate. Good. Another busy day, but all the better for seeing you, mate.
Brilliant. Oh, that's nice. We'll go balls deep then straight away. Let me just turn this off. Right then, obviously you've seen all the action over the weekend, but before we get into that, I want to back up 24 hours from Saturday. Did you see the Lee McGregor fight?
I caught the back end of it from about round 5 onwards. I don't know why I didn't even know it was on. So I managed to catch it, but then I fast forward, then I watched the front end of it over the weekend, if that makes sense. So it's always difficult not knowing the result at the end of the fight, but knowing the result when you watch the first half. But it was a good fight.
Yeah, they gave it as a draw, an MTK fighter on an MTK show. Ben Davison thought he won comfortably. Spencer Fearon said he won by 6 rounds. The judges saw it a draw, and the media and people have spoken had McGregor losing. Does this put Ben Davison's "I'm a new school trainer" into perspective, or has he got a long and hard road ahead of him now that he's opened his mouth?
Well, Ben's a good coach. He's working with some talent. He's definitely got a lot to learn. The one thing I've learned through life and through boxing is, all right, it wasn't a loss, it was a draw. But you have to own the losses and you have to own the draws. And I always did this with my fighters. If my fighters, even when I was an amateur coach back in the day, if you start to tell them they got robbed, they don't think they did anything wrong, they'll never change anything and they'll never put it right. So I think Ben Davison has to be honest with that. And I watched the fight and I thought there was nothing in it. I didn't think it was a robbery. There was nothing in that fight whatsoever, but it wasn't a commanding performance. It wasn't a good performance. The tactics looked questionable. The defense was non-existent. Questions need to be asked. So if you're going to kid yourself and say it was out and out robbed, you're not helping you and you're not helping the fighter's growth.
Well, they're saying they thought they won the fight, and then they're saying they've all got to have a good look at themselves, in his interview on IFL after. So it's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it, really, that?
Yeah, I think the most worrying thing for me was it was blocking punches with his face. There was no kind of craftiness about his work. He was taking punches full on. And even when he had the high guard on, there was still impacting and half landing. And that was worrying for me, because when you get to that top level, if you're blocking punches with your face and you're not really a massive puncher, you've got a hard career in front of you.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel that we're seeing too much of Ben Davison in interviews and that, and not enough of his fighters?
It always depends, because sometimes you have a fighter who's quite an introvert, and not all fighters are going to, let's just say Joe Joyce, for example.
Yeah.
Not all fighters are great with the camera, and they're not great at getting publicity for themselves. So I understand sometimes they have a more vocal coach, they have a more vocal manager who wants to put that fighter out there. But you have to question with some coaches, are they putting the fighter out there or are they putting themselves out there? And it ultimately, boxing is about the box. It's about the boxers. It's not about the coaches.
Okay. Who have you got, Jack Catterall or Josh Taylor?
Josh Taylor all day long.
Okay. Josh Taylor's been given a black eye by Maxie Hughes in sparring.
Yeah, I mean, been in gyms 35 years now, and sometimes fighters get hit, they get hurt, they get dropped. I've seen some very good fighters over the years. You never tell. You're not supposed to tell what happens in the gym, but I've seen some good fighters get dropped over the years. It happens, and if you're gonna have a bad spar, it's better than having a bad fight. And Maxie Hughes is bloody hell. Maxie used to come to my gym Central years ago. He was always a crafty, good little fighter. So it doesn't surprise me, and I do wonder as well. This might sound a contradiction, but it's often difficult for southpaws to fight southpaws. They forge a career out of boxing orthodox people, and sometimes when they're up against southpaws, it causes them problems that they don't quite foresee and they're not used to navigating.
That's why Carl Sagan didn't want to fight Brian McGee, isn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there's the old, adage here that two southpaws make for a bad fight. But all the advantages you've got as a southpaw against somebody who's orthodox suddenly goes out the window. And Maxi Hughes is a cagey little southpaw. So I don't read too much into a black eye, and I don't read too much into sparring, because sparring ultimately, it depends if it's conditioned sparring, open sparring, or I remember reading Ricky Hatton once said he never won a spar in his life. He got beat every single spar because he was always working on things.
Yeah. Okay then. Just a quick one on Steffi Bull and Enzo Maccarinelli going on social media bragging off about going in gay bars. Is it something you've ever done, Julian? By accident, of course.
Listen, people can live their life however they want. Doesn't bother me one bit. I'm very broad-minded, but ultimately, I mean, I'm not suggesting those two, have a tendency towards that, but that's completely up to them anyway. I couldn't care less what people did. I think what I struggle with, Russell, is just why people even feel, that's a conversation, right? Let's just say you accidentally went into a gay bar or a straight bar if you were gay or whatever. It's the need to kind of tell the rest of the world on social media. It's a bit like when people post, they're always posting pictures of the tea. And it's like, for me, listen, all right, I'm a heterosexual male. I'm neither proud of that or ashamed of it. It's just what I am. But what I don't do is my private life is my private life. And even when I go out on a weekend or whatever I do with my friends or whatever, my girlfriend, whatever, I feel it's a bit boring when people overshare things.
See, my argument with that with Steffi is this, and Steffi, I'll tell you this to your face if you want, but I don't need to because I'm on here. Dennis paid for him to go out to Miami, to Fifth Street Gym, to take Jamie McDonald and spruce him up and, polish him up a little bit and let him spar out there with Yanks and all that.
Mm-hmm.
He's not took him out there to take a young lad in gay bars. In the first time, you've seen the twerking video on my channel, haven't you? This is years later. That twerking video where he's doing what he's doing, that's in a gay bar in Spain. So is this something that he does all the time? Miami, Spain, where else has he been? Because my argument is this: if you want a loaf of bread, you got bakers. If you want meat, you go to butchers. If you want petrol, you got petrol stations. So what's he doing in gay bars? Taking young lads in gay bars. I don't agree with it. It's something that I just won't do. No offense, if people want to live that life, pursue that life, good luck to them. But in for me, and I just think it's odd that you tell everybody about that. And Enzo, well, you know what I mean? You start something, you'd be embarrassed, wouldn't you? A proper man.
Well, I think that's the thing for me, as I've just said, it's the oversharing of telling everybody that what you're doing all the time on social media. Yeah. If you went into a gay bar by mistake, so what? I'll get a pint. I wouldn't be right bothered. But it's just the feeling the need to just tell everybody. I don't know. I find, as you know, I've withdrawn from social media. This is the only social media that I now have is just chatting to you on YouTube. And so I wouldn't have seen I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I have one follower on Instagram. It's an account I've kept live just for boxing purposes. I don't.
It's going to take me cold.
I don't live my life on social media. I understand why some people do, but I find the whole thing quite futile. And I've kind of reset myself in my life, and I've said, you know what? I don't want to be checking on Facebook to see how many people have liked my post, and I don't want to be telling people, if I'm going out for dinner with my girlfriend, I want to talk to her and I want to kind of enjoy the food. I don't want to be taking a photo of everybody and doing a vlog. And I just find it a little bit weird. And I just find it a little bit weird why you would tell somebody, not that you've been in a gay bar, why are you just telling anybody anything like that? I just think social media is just it's quite horrible, actually. And that sounds like a hypocrisy because I'm on here now and I'm on here quite a bit, but anybody who knows me knows this is the only time I'm on social media is just talking about boxing because it's a horrible place. It's awful.
Anyway, we'll move on then from Kenny Everett and Alan Carr. Right then, obviously, I'm going to ask your opinion now. WBO European belt, IBF European belt. What next? A British European belt. Where's it going to end?
I mean, that I've heard a few fighters introduced recently over the years, but not many. And then you hear these belts, and then I heard recently at the weekend, I can't remember whose belt it was, and it was the WBO European belt. And I thought, well, first of all, isn't the WBO a global organization? And shouldn't European belts be given out by European commissions, only with European countries affiliated? So what's the WBO got to fucking do with Europe and European belts? It's absolutely nuts. And I'm not knocking fighters who have these belts, because they're obviously proud of these, but it's the system, isn't it? And it's the fact they're allowed to do this. It's like when you get an intercontinental or a regular and an interim. What is all this about? So I will say one thing, Russell, because I always believe in being open, and I said this to you before. I'm a proper dinosaur. I've heard you talk recently about the IBO world title, and you're arguing, and I understand what you're saying, that it's a world title. I don't view any of them as world titles. I view them as organizational belts. Yeah. I think you're a world champion when you prove to be number one and you're a consistent world champion. And perhaps when you unify, that's a different thing. Obviously, Katie Taylor's a world champion, but these belts, they just don't mean anything to me. I just find them a bit of a nonsense. And you may be kidding 90% of the public, but you're certainly not kidding me, and you're not kidding anybody who really understands the heritage of boxing. So a WBO European belt, it's a fucking oxymoron. It's just a joke. So it makes no sense to me.
Okay, then. It's just that Cash Ali's had 2 fights last year for a belt that's just come out. I mean, they've been going since 1984, and then 2021, they've got an IBF European belt. So I did a bit of checking, and in 2014, they brought one of the little guy belts, and Tommy Frank held it at some point last year. But that's only been used 8 times in 8 years. And Cash's belt's been used twice. He won it and defended it. But is it for TV people, or is it to get you send lobbying to get it rankings? Because if Dennis did lobby to put Cash Ali in the top 15 and he got there, what would that say about boxing? Because Cash has just been in with a guy 2-1, who's fought a guy 1-0, and he's fought 2 guys who had the debuts. Then he's fought Cash. So, and there were no belts online, but how can this, if Cash were hypothetically top 15, how would he be fighting a guy like that? I don't get that. And where does it end, all this?
Yeah, I mean, boxing continues to shoot itself in the foot. I mean, the IBF, as I've said before, the IBF was questionable for me in 83, and then the WBO in 88 or whenever it was came out, and I just remember Nigel Benn fighting Doug Dewitt for the belt, and I just thought, oh, come on, this is absolutely ludicrous. And then when they start to split the belts up in terms of an interim and a regular and a super and an emeritus, and it's a nonsense. So in terms of Cash Ali, I don't really know how good he is, because other than the David Price fight, we've yet to see him in a meaningful fight. He might be a really good fighter. But if I was Cash Ali, I'd be campaigning for the British title. That's what I would be doing. I'd be saying, look, I want to go after a real belt, because anybody out there, the British title, I don't care if it's been, kind of pushed to one side over the last few years. The British title, the Lord Lonsdale Challenge belt, is a beautiful belt, and it means something. So if I was Cash Ali, I'd be like saying to Dennis, lobby the board of control, get me in an eliminator to fight for the British title, because I want to fight for the British title. I want to actually get something that means something. And in terms of winning these belts, what they're taking selfies with, and they don't always win them, do they? They just get given them. It's like, I'm not denigrating the fighter, but if people think that they are a champion of something or a champion of anything when they've got these belts, which sometimes are contested by guys in the lower, outside the top 50 in the world, they're just kidding themselves. That's all they're doing. It's false economy.
Yeah. Okay. Eddie Hearn was sat ringside at his recent show recently, and he's looking up and then looking down and then shouting instructions to fight. A lot of people have said he was looking at himself. What do you think, Rich, Julian?
I think he was definitely looking at himself because I noticed it quite early on in the show. And I just thought, Hearn's distracted by something. There's either someone at the other side of the arena, there's either something that's caught his eye. And I kept watching, looking up. And then I saw in between rounds, I just saw the stills. It was of the main event. And I think it was Eubank and whatever show, not Eubank, whatever the main event was. And I saw Hearn keep looking up. I thought, oh, it's just a TV screen. It's just a still. And then it went to the action at the start of the next round of the fight. And Hearn looked up and he glanced. And every time Hearn was in the shot of the TV, he's like that. And he's shouting and he's almost trying to look quite knowingly. So I think Eddie spotted himself right in the middle of the picture, right in the middle of the TV. And it was acting out in front of the camera. He was coaching, actually. He's not only an undefeated amateur boxer, he's also a professional coach as well.
4-0, 3 by
He was
way
better
off.
than my first 4 fights. I lost one of those fights. I got stopped in the first round in my first amateur fight, and I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, I won my next 3 in pretty convincing fashion, but so Eddie certainly had a better record than I did.
Okay, moving on to Eddie's show. John Ryder, Jacobs. Everybody's saying Jacobs were robbed royally. What do you think, Julian?
Scoring is subjective when it's a really close fight, but for me, Jacobs and Ryder was one of those fights that was quite easy to score. You know, like sometimes you get 12 rounds and they're quite hard to score because every single round is contested quite clearly. And I thought it was quite clear that at least 7 of those rounds, Jacobs won handily. It was just boxed absolutely beautiful for an older guy. You know, it was the moves were still there, and Ryder didn't seem, certainly the first 4 rounds, Ryder didn't seem to have a clue to the ring craft that was being put on him. So I had it 7-4-1 to Jacobs at the end of that fight, and I thought he convincingly won the fight. So people would say, well, that's, you know, some rounds are subjective, but as I've just said, I didn't think a lot of those rounds were subjective. I thought the big rounds, the good rounds that Ryder had, I gave to Ryder. The 7 rounds I gave to Jacobs, he boxed really, really lovely. And there was just 1 round I couldn't quite go. So I don't like to give more than 1 even round. So I'll give 1 even round. But listen, the script is done, isn't it? It's a case of Jacobs is towards the end of his career. He's come over for a good payday. There's talk of Eddie having a 2-fight deal with Canelo. So he's doing exactly what he did before. He's going to give him a gimme fight, an easy fight against Ryder, just like he did with Yildirim, and then he got the Billy Joe Saunders fight. So he gives him an easy fight against Ryder. He ticks the box in terms of promoting Ryder and says, well, I also delivered you a world title fight against the best fighter in the world. So he's done his job there. And then he'll deliver a bigger fight for Canelo. So these things are just engineered. But the one thing I always ask Russell, and I've said this before, how come whenever there's a fight where you think it's a poor decision, I won't say an out-and-out robbery, but it's a poor decision, it's always the away fighter that gets shafted. And it's always the home fighter who gets the benefit of the doubt every single time. So what does that tell you when it's always the home fighter who gets the benefit of the doubt? It tells you it's
the judges and that have had a fantastic fight week in a nice hotel. We've ferried about in limos.
Yep.
And charged everything to hotel. We know it.
Well, listen, if you're a judge and you continually score against Eddie's fighter, you're not going to be a judge for very long on these big shows, are you?
No.
You'll get relegated back down to the
small
halls in the sports centres. That's where you'll end up.
Okay. Cash Felix Cash against Madiev. Did you watch that?
I did. That was a really good fight.
Yeah. Felix Cash against Eubank, who wins?
I thought when you raised that question last week, I thought Eubank wins that fight. But what I will say about Felix Cash is, you know, we're always quick to jump on people when they've got knockover jobs. I thought it was against a really good opponent. It was a competitive fight. And let's give him credit for getting up from those knockdowns and really keeping his composure, And for me, it doesn't make him a vulnerable fighter. It doesn't mean he wasn't as good as we first thought, because we thought he's a good fighter, and he's definitely a really good, I don't like to use the word prospect when he's had so many fights, but in terms of a European sort of level prospect, he's looking good. So I thought it was a good performance against a good opponent. There were obviously some vulnerabilities there. The defense was a little bit leaky, but his composure was good. But I still don't think he'd beat Eubank. I just think it's a timing thing. And maybe in 12, 18 months, that result would be different. But I think Eubank will be too sharp for him and a little bit too experienced for him.
Okay. Later on in the show, I'm gonna do a competition. So get ready. Win a signed glove by Carl Froch.
It's nice.
So keep watching. I'm going to spring the question up anytime between now and the end. I'm not going to pick out, not go through every one of Eddie's fights on the show, on the card, sorry. Opie Price beat that Roman. He looks like he's coming on good, doesn't he, Opie Price? I said that through gritted teeth.
Listen, I've said before, Opie Price is a really good prospect. I've seen him spar a couple of times. He used to take an amateur over to the gym where there were Hunslet, and him and his brother. They were good kids, really, really good kids. And I just think there's something lovely about his style. You know, he's got that loose, languid southpaw style, but he's got quite a lot of spite in his backhand. That left cross, so accurate. And you know, will fill out. He's super bantamweight at the moment, but he'll probably end up being a super featherweight or something. And I think he'll go really far. I look at some prospects and I think he'll probably get to a British title. He'll probably get beyond that. But I think Opie Price, as long as he's developed properly, he's managed properly, doesn't need to rush. He's a bit like Dennis McCann. Your physicality is not quite there yet, but I'll be very surprised if that young man doesn't win a world title, seriously.
Okay, Johnny Fisher against Nguema. He's had a bit of stick, Johnny Fisher. People saying he's raw and it would have stepped up too much, but he got the win and blah, blah, blah. I think he might have just been a bit eager to get him out of there.
Yeah, there's a couple of things with Johnny Fisher. I mean, listen, he's a strong kid. He's a physical kid. But the one thing I've noticed when I've watched all of his fights, and I think it was his first or second fight, I was screaming at the TV, and it does take time. He had one of his opponents he hurt. All he's got is a right hand, and I keep looking for a left hook to be added to his game. And there was a couple of left hooks he threw and missed quite badly at the weekend. But all he's got is that right hand, and I saw him in his last few fights against opponents who were moving to their left, so moving clockwise. And they were walking onto his right hand, and he was kind of following them around the ring. So that tells me he's got a lot of ring craft he needs to learn. There's a lot of things he needs to learn, but he's got the right coach. He's definitely got the right coach with the right temperament to bring him on. But don't rush that kid, because he's not ready. If they rush him, he'll get absolutely taken apart.
He'll get marmalised, won't he?
Yeah, he'll so.
Could you imagine him against Dave Allen? He'd get put into orbit, wouldn't he, against Dave Allen?
He's just too open, he's too raw, he's too green, and I really want to see Mark Tibbs develop. I mean, this will be the stuff he'll be working on with him. I want to see him develop him, dropping his height and throwing those left hooks underneath and left hooks around the side, little right uppercuts to the chest. I want to see that inside game that we never seem to see with British fighters at any kind of level. You know, go on about the inside game and the mid-range game.
Does anybody teach that in UK? James Tony Mayweather styles?
I'm going to sound like a dickhead. I always talk this with my fighters. It was like, so I'll give you an example. Recently, last 6 months or so ago, I was for 3 years, working with a really good prospect. He was an elite amateur, one of the best amateurs in the country, and he had a fantastic long game. It's a little bit like Opie Price. So he had a great jab, great long game, brilliant feet. What am I going to bring to his long game? Absolutely nothing. So what you've got to do is you've got to look at what he can't do. If you think of a fight, I'll give you the classic example, and this is not to be patronizing, Russell. This is just for people listening from a trainer's perspective. If you think of most fights and you think of the classic example of Leonard and Hagler, 1987. So Sugar Ray Leonard, in the early part of a fight, if you're a boxer, if you have a long game, you can utilize the reflexes and the speed and the reach in the early part of a fight. And then what happened with Leonard and Hagler was then after 4 or 5 rounds, Hagler started to close the gap. But because Leonard had that mid-range game, he was able to not just survive on the inside, but score on the inside and mess Hagler around and throw the right shots. And then when it got to the trenches in the 9th round and the 12th round, and there were times where they were in the pocket, Ray Leonard also had the inside game. Had it just been about the long game and the rangy game and, you know, that kind of distance and that fencing like those elite amateurs do, Leonard would have got eaten alive by Hagler after 5 or 6 rounds. But it's the fact that he had an understanding of all those 3 key ranges in boxing. So why people, I'll give you an example now. Okay, Josh Kelly. Josh Kelly, when he fought Evan Essian, he had the pivots, he had the movement, he had the long game. Okay, because he was a great amateur, he was an elite amateur, and he was able to navigate the first 2 or 3 rounds by using his reflexes. The minute I watched that live, and the minute that turned into a closer game and Evan Essian started walking him down, he'd got nothing to fight it with. He'd got no blocks, he'd got no inside pocket work, there was nothing up close he could deal with. And he was almost panicking as Evan Essian was putting the pressure on him. He was panicking. So all you coaches out there who are not, you get a fighter who's got a brilliant long game. Great. He'll always be able to do that. You've got to focus on what those great coaches in the 70s and 80s, the Eddie Futchers, the George Bentons, all those brilliant coaches used to do in fighting. Look at James Toney. Look at, as a later version of James Toney. Bernard Hopkins was just brilliant and crafty. Why are we not teaching this? Because if you don't teach it, you'll never have a complete fighter. If Johnny Fisher doesn't learn that inside range and that mid-range, he'll never be a complete fighter, and he'll always panicking up close. And I just don't know why we're not teaching it. And the probable answer, Russell, is 2 points. Either people don't see that you have to, fights at some point when you're a boxer will always end up in the pocket, won't they? When you get tired, you end up in a fucking battle. It's as simple as that. You don't get many fighters who can navigate 12 rounds against an aggressive fighter and continue beyond the back foot. It doesn't happen. So you have to teach it. So they're either not teaching it because they don't see it, or they don't know how to teach it. So
is that a black mark against UK coaches then?
I would say so. I'll tell you who was good at that. Joe Gallagher. And Joe Gallagher used to, I remember telling you a while ago, and I went to Joe Gallagher's gym and he was watching Sanchez and Gomez and he was studying all these VHS tapes, or maybe Joe, there were DVDs, I'm showing my age. And he was honestly, he was studying all this. I think Joe Murray was sparring Sykes, and he got John Murray to put the kettle on. He goes, "Get the kettle on, John, for Julian, make him a fucking cup of tea." I thought Joe was great. He kind of ran the gym. But Joe was watching the right, I'm not blowing smoke, I'm just telling you how it is. Joe was watching the right kind of fights. And Joe Gallagher understands the catch and the block. That's something that in the early days that Josh Taylor was brilliant at. And I know he learned that in the amateurs, the catch and the block and the dip and the screw, those close range things. So Gallagher's fighters have all been able to fight inside, and they've all been really good at applying pressure at that close range and that mid-range. If you think of Julio Cesar Chavez in his absolute prime, and then you watch how he cut down the ring against Hector Camacho, that was and it took his time, but how he got to Meldrick Taylor, that's an absolute clinic in pressure fighting, blocking, defensive while you're still attacking. That's a clinic. The way Julio Cesar Chavez stopped Edwin Rosario in 1986, that is just fucking brilliant. And I don't know why coaches in the UK are not watching that and they're not implementing that. I've got no idea.
Okay. It looks like Tony Bellew's getting ready for another run at it.
Well, you know me, I said before, I like Tony. So I saw my mate this morning. I've been working, but we just had half an hour off, and we give each other some pads. We just do it to keep sharp, half an hour on the pads. And he said to me, did Stuart, he says, "Bellew's looking good. Have you seen him lately?" I went, no. He said, "Jules, you called it about 6 months ago." He said he was looking quite thin in the face. And he said, he's coming back, his value. Absolutely no doubt about it.
I've been told today off somebody that he's coming back because he wants Usyk at heavyweight, because he's always been a heavyweight, and he feels that coming down from heavyweight, fighting Hay, to then fight Usyk, he feels that that won't the best Tony Bellew, and that he wants Usyk at heavyweight. So I've been told today.
I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like everybody wants Usyk or they want Fury because they're the money fights, aren't they? Nobody ever wants anybody who's like outside the top 15 who's dangerous. They just want the money fights. If I was a professional fighter, I'd want Canelo Alvarez. I'd be calling out Canelo Alvarez. In fact, the fact that he'd put me, 6 feet under, I'd be calling Alvarez out because I'd be like, here comes the money.
Do you think, Julian, that Tony's coming back because I've been getting him stick because he never took a belt off the champion?
Probably not. I think he'd have a bigger reason to come back.
Or like 10 million reasons.
Yeah, he'd have, listen, I said before, gone on record, if he came back and he could earn a couple of million, I won't blame him at all.
Okay. Do you feel, though, coming back, and he's 40 this year, do you think that it's a bit of a kick in the face for fans that we've got to having to wheel these people out like him and Hay and, men in the 40s?
Yeah, look, it's always gone on, hasn't it? It's just, it's really hard. It's like fighters, it's in the blood. I mean, there was nothing sadder for me than watching William Joppy when he stopped Roberto Duran. I can't remember how old Duran was. It was just awful. And I remember even older than that when Jeff Fenech and Azuma Nelson fought for the third time. I think Nelson was 48 or something. It's like, I don't know if it's all they know or they're absolutely broke. And I wouldn't think Bellew would be broke whatsoever. There's something quite, I don't mean Bellew, I'm talking about fighters who are really way past it, like old shadows of themselves. And there's something quite sad about that. It's like when Rocky Marciano knocked Joe Louis through the ropes. It's really kind of hard to watch. And there's certain fights I'll pay for and certain fights I won't pay for. And if Tony Bellew came back, and I like Tony Bellew and it was on pay-per-view, I wouldn't pay for it.
You would?
No, I wouldn't. I like him, but I wouldn't pay for it. No, it wouldn't. I want to pay to see high-level boxing.
Not people getting the pension fights.
Yeah, it's just not something that interests me.
Okay.
I guess it's like anything else. You say that, and then you look at, let's see who else is on the card. But it doesn't personally interest me. But good luck to them. I think it's shameful when people are putting, as I said before, the likes of Evander Holyfield out at 57. I mean, whoever put Evander Holyfield in a ring wants fucking shooting, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
our pal Max Jenkins, aka the Breadcrumb, has gone out to Estonia. Trainers let him down, and Cutman has gone out on his own, and he's got a first round knockout, and he's over the moon. And he took your advice before he got in the ring, so well done, and thanks for helping him.
You're welcome. Listen, people say to me, they said, Jules, they've said this to me before because I've worked with not loads of fighters because of busy lives, but I'll give you an example. I once took a kid on who'd lost 13 times on the trot. The board had taken his license off him, they suspended him. And he came to the
13 losses?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you people who've got more than that now and never had a win, and they're still fighting.
Yeah, they suspended him. I actually had to, he came to see me and he goes, look, can I just train with you? I'm not going to give his name because I don't embarrass him, but can I train with you? And we had Josh Warrington in the camp with his dad and Sykes at the time. So we got a really good camp. And I said, look, I only have so much time, but if you want to come and you want to work with us, not a problem. But we really got to like him, and it was kind of like a gym mascot. And the board basically suspended him. They asked me if I'd represent him, and I went to see the board of control. And what I actually said to the board of control was, look, and I listed all the fights he's had. And he'd been up against guys like Lee Selby, that level every single time, and he was getting stopped and he was getting beaten points. And I says, what you've created is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you'd have matched him in his lane at a level, you should be allowed to continue to fight. You've created this situation. You've created all these losses by signing off on these fights in the first place. Anyway, I won my case and they reinstated his license. And I actually took him to box on a Steffi Bull. show. So we gave him, Sykes didn't have a fight at the time, and Josh Warrington didn't. And Josh and Sykes were brilliant with him, and they sparred with him, they trained with him. And we got him, it was shredded, he was feeling good about himself. And he boxed on a Steffi Bull show against a kid who had one fight and won it, a decent kid. And he got a draw, and when you get a draw against a kid who's a home fighter who sold a load of tickets, you know you've won, you know it's a poor decision. And he boxed fantastically. So for him, that was like his world title. But I guess the point I'm laboring over is I'll work with anybody as long as they stay in the lane. I think it's quite important that, and that's what I insisted with this young man at the time. I says, I'll work with you, but if you get offered a match I don't like, I ain't going, mate. I'm not taking it. I'm not in the business of getting people hurt. I said, you've got limited skills, you're on your way out, etc. And Max is exactly the same. Look, I'm not going to make a comeback in coaching in terms of giving up too much of my time, but I said to Max, I'll do a few sessions with you. Russell has asked me to do a few sessions with you. I'll give you a few pointers, and I've got no issue, if you want a bit of help, as long as you're fighting somebody who's at your kind of level. I don't see anything wrong with that. I just don't like when the board are signing off on these really good kids who are 20-0 fighting kids who are like 3-60. It's a farce. So Max, well done, really good effort. He knows he's got so much work to do and limited time.
He's got a dig on him, hasn't he?
When I took him on the pads just once, his jab, honestly, it's a ramrod of a jab. It's a seriously heavy shot. I could feel it on the pad and on my chest, and I'm like, he's a heavy-handed lad. And people say, well, he's bound to be. He's a heavyweight. Trust me, I've taken a lot of heavyweights on the pads. They don't all punch. They don't all have much strength about them. Max has got a dig. He's just, look, defensively he's not great. Technically he's not great. And that's only because he's not been taught how to do it.
Yeah.
He's self-taught effectively. So good luck to him. Max, keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about what people say about you. Don't worry about all the hate that you're getting. As my grandma used to say, if they're talking about you, they're leaving some other bugger alone. And keep doing what you're doing, mate. And don't take any silly fights, because if you do, Russell and myself will be like telling you, no.
Yeah, okay. Let's have a look. What's your view on Ebony Bridges, Julian?
I once got attacked on social media because I said before the Shannon Courtney fight, I said she couldn't fight. I wasn't being rude. I'd seen her and I just says, she's awful and she can't fight. And then her and Courtney had an absolute humdinger of an action-packed fight. So I changed my mind and I said, she can fight, she can't box. Yeah. So I got hammered for that. So that's one of the reasons you come off social media, like, bloody hell. I think she's a novelty act. She absolutely lost the last fight by a landslide. I couldn't make a case for winning more than a couple of rounds in that fight. And if I'm being honest, personally, I don't get why she's so popular. And maybe as a man, I'm missing something. But listen, and this is going to sound really awful. She say, who the fuck are you? But if it's a bit of eye candy thing, first of all, that diminishes women's boxing. It's just, they're athletes. They're athletes. And I think, I mean, getting into a ring wearing fishnet tights, the border control, hang your heads in shame for allowing that. Absolutely fucking disgraceful, because she took boxing into the sewer that night by allowing fishnet tights.
Could you imagine Savannah Marshall or Chantel Cameron getting it ringing fishnets? Oh,
it's just, it's so derogatory to women, isn't it? It's just such an awful thing. And I get, everybody has to make their own sort of niche in life. And I think that's what she's doing, but she can't box. She definitely can't punch. And I know not a lot of women are the heaviest of hitters, apart from Savannah Marshall. I wouldn't want the right hand off her. But I don't get it. It's like, I just don't get it. And people will be screaming now of saying, what do you mean you don't get it? You're a man. Why don't you, a red-blooded man? Why don't you get it? I don't get it. I am still quite prudish when it comes to the sport I love. I believe it should be I don't mean in terms of women's boxing. I just mean in terms of blonde bombshells wearing fishnets in a ring. Come on, we're better than that. It's not like, say, the Chantel Camerons and Savannah Marshall and all these people trying to carve out reputations and careers in women's boxing, and she just comes along and just awful. She's not my cup of tea at all.
Okay.
In fact, I won't watch a fight now. So after that last decision, any Ebony Bridges fight, it's pointless asking me because I won't have seen it.
She wears lingerie at weigh-ins, front of all officials. Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on, shall we? Right, Steve Gray's performance in the Ellie Scotney fight. What were all that about? A lot of complaints about that.
Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. I was shouting at the TV. I still get passionate about boxing. The headlocks that she was putting on her opponent were constant. And it got to the stage then we got the headlocks and the arm locks. You know, she was literally, it's called hooking. So she was hooking her opponent's right arm with her left arm and literally holding on for dear life. And this goes back to the point I made 3 or 4 questions ago. Why are people teaching infighting? If you can fight inside, you don't need to hold inside. You can work inside. But personally, and this is nothing against, Scotland, there was nothing against her at all. She's talented. I thought the fight was too early for her. People say, well, how was it too early for her? She won. I thought the fight was too early for her. After 2 rounds, she was holding and she was in a war. She doesn't need to be rushed. She's only had 3 fights. But personally, I would have, this is just me, watch the fight again, forget the commentary, forget the home fighter. This is boxing. Boxing's got to be a fair sport. It's got to be a level playing field. I would have disqualified. I would have given her a point after 2 or 3 rounds. I would have definitely given her a point by another point by the midway. And towards the end, I would have disqualified her for holding. It's against the rules.
Frightened though, aren't they, to do it against own fighter?
Well, it took him 10 rounds to take the point off, didn't it? What are you waiting for? Just be assertive. You know, Harry Gibbs in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and Sid Nathan and all these old school referees, they didn't take shit off fighters, and they certainly didn't take shit from promoters and managers lobbying them, telling them what we should and shouldn't be doing. Harry Gibbs would have thrown us straight out, no messing. No messing at all.
What do you think?
She's a good prospect.
Yeah. What do you think to the pundits that's only using it? Darren Barker and people like that. Do you think any of these are ever going to tell it as they see it, or do you think they're always going to be biased to the paymasters?
I think they're absolutely dreadful. I think they're lame. Actually, I would use the word lame, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to these guys, but they are lame. They are clearly sucking up to Eddie Hearn, and I prefer people who are their own man. I like Barry Jones and people like that. People who are their own man, and they just say it as it is. And I think the preview shows I've stopped watching. I've now just started switching on to the boxing. I give it 5-10 minutes when it starts, and then I go in and I watch the boxing. I've stopped watching the weigh-ins. I've stopped watching the pre-fights and all this stuff. I can't watch it because I find it sickly, and they'll never come out and tell the truth, will they? Ever? Yeah.
Okay. A guy who gets a lot of stick and he doesn't help himself. The Gab. He's in headlines again. He seems to be, every time there's somebody half pretty or a female fighter, whether it be a cage fighter, boxer, media woman, he's having selfies with them. Do you think that selfies with them? Is this bordering on starstruckness or him getting excited at a show like a child, or is it plain old pestering? Or is he just trying to be a self-promotion guy because he's everywhere at the moment? He's in every Zoom. He's everywhere. And what upsetting me, hang on a sec. What's upsetting me at the moment? He seems to do interviews, and when they're talking about what's coming up, he said, "Well, I know about that, but I can't tell you." Who the fuck is he to be doing that with boxing fans and all this stuff back? He's supposed to be media, isn't he? And he's just put that story out on Telegraph about yeah, there's going to be step aside. Well, he got that wrong, didn't he? He was used as a pawn there, wasn't he, by obviously Fury's camp, wasn't he, in that.
And he upset a lot of people. He certainly upset Anthony Joshua there, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard they won't do it. They won't talk to him now. Other team Joshua, but do you feel that he's a bit starstruck, he wants to be he's after fame? I don't know. He seems to act like a child. I mean, I've seen a video just now. Somebody sent me of him doing karate kicks ringside and all this. And do you think he's just immature, or is he high on something? Because everybody's telling me that he takes cocaine. So I don't know. Is he losing plot?
I'm trying to work out if he'd get through Peter Fury's front door.
I know he won't. I know he won't.
He might not get. He might not. It's a bit weird from a personal point of view. Listen, I've got two daughters, a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. So I'm always a little bit. I've got to choose my words really carefully now. When men of a certain age behave a certain way around pretty young girls, I always find it really unnerving. I'm, as I said earlier, you know, people really know me, will tell you this. I'm quite prudish. I had a traditional upbringing and I was brought up a certain way by my dad. And listen, I am a man, you know, but I just think there's a certain cut-off point with I'm 50-year-old. There's a certain cut-off point when an attractive lady enters the room certainly of a younger age, you know, someone in their 20s, and a man's clearly getting excited by that. And I find it a little bit unnerving. And if somebody would behave like that around my two daughters, I'd react. You see me diplomatic now, but I'd react in a completely different way. And it won't be with diplomacy. I just find it strange.
I can't imagine you being like that, Julian, losing your cool.
Hey, there's a couple of people who could. It takes a lot. I've got the longest fuse in the world. I've had people call me out and other stuff, and I've just said, "Yep, fine." I've walked off. I'm not interested. But there's a couple of people, an ex-professional boxer actually, who's seen me a couple of times outside lose it, and yeah, of course, can lose my cool, but it takes a lot. I've got way too much of a reputation to lose my cool. But when you're talking about family and when you're talking about your daughters, and I just back to the question, I just found it weird. I found that video weird. The whole Ebony Bridges showing him the tattoo thing. It was like an old perv, wasn't it? Just perving over some
Peeping Tom. Look like a peeping Tom.
It was weird behavior, and I don't. He probably watches the videos, and I don't care. It's like just behave a certain way around ladies, and just be professional. Stop getting excited. It's just ridiculous. And the fact that you're a sycophant and you was saying that Ebony Bridges is like a female Muhammad Ali, you're talking with your dick, mate. You're not talking with anything else.
All right, moving on from the adventures of Fred West then. Sorry,
he's funny. God. He's funny.
Right. Audley Harrison. You think his head's gone?
You see, again, I'm not on social media, but my mate sent me a couple of videos from Audley Harrison, talking absolute nonsense. Just he mentioned this channel, didn't he? And he couldn't get the words out. I think Weapon of the Week was what he was trying to say, but he mentioned the channel, and he looks so spaced out. And I don't know, if I'm being honest, the two videos I saw, I was quite worried about Audley Harrison. I was never one of those people who gave him stick like a lot of people did, because this is an Olympic gold medalist, a former British, European and Commonwealth champion. Okay, he didn't cross over into the pros as he would have hoped. And it was a pacifist performance against David Hay, but, you know, he was a good fighter, and he was certainly matched hard towards the end of his career, the likes of David Price and Deontay Wilder, and he took his lumps. So I personally worried about Audley Harrison, the videos I've seen lately.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got issues, Audley. Okay. I want to ask you about the Olympic team from 2016. Ash Fax, he's 9-1. Cordina 14-0. Kelly 12-1-1. Fowler 15-2, Boazzi 15-0, Joyce 13-0. Them six have not won a world title. They've not fought for a world title. Okolie 17-0, Savannah Marshall 11-0. They've won world titles. Nicola Adams retired. She 5-1. She got hers via an email, her world title. But what's happened to this 2016 lot from Rio?
Such a dreadful waste of talent and mismanagement and poor guidance, poor development, everything. You know, I'll always quote back to certain eras, but if you look at the 76 Olympics, you know, like the US team, you've got Ray Leonard 3 years on was beating Benitez. Leon Spinks 2 years on was beating Ali. Mike Spinks was beating Eddie Mustafa after 4 years. He was light heavyweight champion of the world. All these 76 Olympians and these, obviously 80 was boycotted.
Look at the 84 lot.
Look at the 84 lot. I mean, Mark Breland, Pernell Whitaker, Meldrick Taylor. These guys.
Holyfield.
Yeah, two years Evander Holyfield was world champion. 3 years Whitaker and Meldrick Taylor. Who's advising these guys? Who's saying to Joshua Boazzi, take your time, take your time, take your time. There's no rush. It's either a comment on the times and boxing, the fact that all fighters are largely quite inactive now and fight 3 times a year and all this nonsense, or they don't want it, or they're being badly advised. And that, I think it's a mixture of everything, but generally, I would say that they've been badly advised. I think one thing also as well, Russell, is I found if you look at Anthony Fowler and Kez Ashfrak, for example, those guys were amateurs for so long. Whereas the US Olympic team we've just talked about, you know, those two great teams, Meldrick Taylor was 18 years old when he won Olympic gold, and he went pro straight away. He didn't say, okay, I'm now gonna see if I can go to Seoul 88 and get a double Olympics. Because the Olympians now, or the GB squad, are getting such good money and good funding, they're staying amateur for way too long, and then they're turning over at 26 years old, 27 years old, and they're not where they want to be.
Fraser Clark fights, doesn't he, at weekend on Carl undercard. He's 30, isn't he?
I mean, it's people say, oh, heavyweights mature late. Come on, it's a load of rubbish. Ali, Tyson, Floyd Patterson, all these gold medalists, you know, Joe Fraser, George Foreman, they were all young men when they turned pro. Fraser Clark, 30-year-old, what's he going to do?
Only turned pro, didn't he, when he was 30?
Yeah, it's way too late, and they also get set in the amateur format and the amateur style of boxing.
Like Audley.
Yeah, and well, Audley was a fantastic exponent of the 1-2. He was the 4-2s. It was 4 2-minute rounds when Audley won gold. It was like fencing, wasn't it? And he was an amazing at that fencing style, the bounce and the 1-2-1. And when it came to turnover, he was getting beat by guys like Martin Rogan, just because they were professional hardened fighters with only 20% of skill level. So the 2016, the men in that squad, absolutely anticlimactic. And by the time they get to their destination, they'll be not experienced enough, not good enough, and not young enough, honestly. And people say, McGowan, you're talking shit. Look at Teofimo Lopez and Ryan Garcia. Look at those guys. I know, Lopez got big, but the young men, aren't they? The 22, 23-year-old, and they're right at the top of the division. And you've got pros turning over at 26, 27, 28 after being amateur for 15 years. It's too long. So that Cordina, I mean, what's he had? What did you say? 10 fights, 11 fights? I mean, that is a joke.
Cordina, 14-0.
14 fights.
14-0.
14 fights in 5 years.
6
That
years,
poor
isn't it?
guy. Yeah, and also he can't be earning that much, can he? If he's having 14 fights in 5 years, if you're getting more money if he worked at KFC, it's a joke.
Yeah,
Mismanagement and people and promotional outfits, and managers not understanding how to develop real talent. Look at Canelo Alvarez. He turned over young. Look at all those fights Alvarez has had. It's no coincidence that Canelo Alvarez is the best fighter in the world. He's also one of the most fucking active fighters in the world.
yeah. Okay. Aaron Chambers from Geordie Shore, age 34, has signed a deal today with Sky and boxer to turn pro, and he's going to be trained by go to Adam Booth, the Dark Lord. He's the best.
Well, you're the host, Russell. You ask the questions. I'm gonna ask you questions because the genuine questions. I'm not being facetious. So, what's his name again?
Aaron Chambers.
Aaron Chambers. So, has Aaron Chambers, has he got an amateur pedigree?
No, from Geordie Shore.
So,
No,
he's a reality TV star?
reality TV. I'll get it up on my phone. Just turn my phone.
I said before, I like Adam Booth, but he's either got a lack of heads in the gym at the moment, or he's got some time in his calendar, or
He's getting paid a lot of money.
getting paid a lot of money. Yeah, I'd rather work, like I said, with a kid like Max and give him a couple of hours of my time, who, whether people think he's useless or not, I'd rather work with somebody like that and get a kick out of actually improving somebody in the gym than just be around these people, because I've never seen Geordie Shore in my life. What's the other one?
I am.
There's an Essex one, isn't there?
The only way is Essex.
Never seen that in my life. I don't know who these people are. I do know that we have. It's very sad, isn't it? Was it Ricky Gervais who said, you know, when did people become famous for not being good at anything? And when did that happen? And when did they become professional fighters?
I'm going to read it out to you. Aaron Chambers has signed a multi-fight deal with Sky Sports and boxer, the Geordie Shore star. There you go. Will be trained and managed by Adam Booth as he embarks in a career in pro boxing. He's 34-year-old, apparently, has signed a multi-fight deal with Sky. There you go.
So, okay, flash there, wonderful. So, I mean, I've got various thoughts on that. The main one is that Sky, I was really pleased that they've got boxing back as a program on their channel, and I thought it's early days and it's infant days, but they've seemingly reacted to a lot of criticism over the last few years and the influence that Matchroom have had on the production, the broadcast of their channel. And I'm thinking, well, this is a really good thing now that Sky are going to start bringing through some grassroots fighters. They're going to grow some household names we've never seen before. And then they make a decision like that. And then you just think, do you know what? You're not fucking taking it seriously, actually. Unless he's a serious amateur boxer and he was an open class amateur boxer and I don't know about it, then I don't know what to say, really. It's like, we continue to hammer nails into boxing's coffin, don't you? But when it's the trainers and the managers who's doing that and the fighters, it's not good.
Okay.
So
you what?
I certainly won't watch him. If now I know who he is, if I'm watching a Sky Bill and the camera turns to him and he does his ring walk, I'll just go and make a cup of tea or something.
Gimmicks, isn't it?
I can't watch it. It's shit.
But if they're going to get views on it, that's how it's going, isn't it, at the moment, boxing?
Well, everything's going like that now, isn't it? Andy Warhol wasn't that wrong, really, was what he was saying about, you know, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. We all know that quote. But I remember when, I think I've said this before, when Big Brother first came on, and I got sucked in really, really early on. And people are paying, or people are calling it entertainment to see these bizarre people just cringeworthy and with no filters and no embarrassment around them, just show themselves up. And now we're making, it's one thing doing it on reality TV, but it's another thing making professional athletes do that. And the thing that'll piss me off, and shame on you, Ben Shalom, for signing him, absolute shame on you, seriously. What'll piss me off is the fact there'll be kids on these small halls that we've been talking about who were probably, you know, open class amateurs and win the elite ABA finals and things such as that, boxing for 1,500 quid, breaking their back, selling tickets, running around, driving around until the day of the weigh-in, flogging tickets to just get the career moving. And then you just get somebody who's probably a pretty boy who's been on TV on some car crash television, watched by inane, vacuous people, and you're going to make this guy into a star. Fuck off.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Okay, then. Frank Warren, kind of taunting Eddie Hearn in the last 3 or 4 days in his interviews. He seems to got his mojo back, doesn't he? Old Bricktop. I saw him doing shoulder roll yesterday on IFL, and he's the comeback kid, isn't he? I liked the fact that he put it out there that DAZN are not going to be doing anything with BT, even though Eddie Hearn said it was a done deal. He said Joshua Fury were a done deal, didn't he, as well? But Frank's come out and confirmed about Joshua wanting another 5 million, so they pulled plug, didn't they? Do you feel now that Joshua don't want to go anywhere near Usyk and he's been looking for a way out, and that Joshua will fight White, and that White Fury won't happen? And
yeah, even though last time we spoke, I gave Joshua a pass if he doesn't do the Usyk rematch. He absolutely wanted more money. There's no doubt about that. So don't come out with statements saying I've always wanted the Usyk rematch. And
they activated it on October 8th, 4.5 months ago. It was activated.
He didn't want it, and I understand why he wouldn't want it, but just be open about that and say, I need to go back to the drawing board, I need to develop. But if he'd have got the 20 million, he would have been more than happy to just sit at home and count his money. Just call it as it is. That's fine, but it's the bullshit. What I absolutely loved what Frank Warren said was, I've tried to watch a few more IFL interviews now, knowing that you're going to have me on this show, thinking, look, Jules, you can't just say, I never watch social media, you've got to watch something. I watched Frank Warren's interview, and it was brilliant, and he definitely had his mojo back, and he's quite funny in a cheeky sort of dry ways, Warren. But the one point for me, what was absolute brilliant, when Warren said, why is Eddie Hearn so interested in what I'm doing with my fighters? He says, why don't you go look after your own? Why? And he said, why don't you go make the Usyk rematch? Stop focusing on me and my fighters, and you just worry about yourself.
He said, go make Callum Smith go Axie as well, didn't he?
What a great line that was. He was saying, you're talking to me about fights I should be making, and you've got two light heavyweights in-house who could make a real massive fight, Callum Smith and Boatsy. Why did you go and make that? And I thought Warren was just so sharp and so on point there, so on point. And it's a good point, good question, isn't it? It's like, why is Eddie Hearn so obsessed in what other promoters and other managers are doing with their fighters? Why don't he just get on with his own? Warren was spot on. Warren's destroying him right now, he really is.
Yeah, it looks to me like by the end of the year he's going to be top dog, doesn't it?
Yeah, I said, you've asked me who the number one promoter in Britain, and I said Eddie Hearn, and I did say, didn't I? I says, you're only as good as your last fight, or you're only as good as your last promotion.
Yeah.
And how the momentum is going now, it's all pointing to Frank getting that top spot back in in British boxing. He's certainly got the cream of the heavyweights.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just give a big shout out to Michelle at Cosmetic Beach? She's not very well, but she's going to cheer us up and go out and do a bit of sunbathing next week, I think. So I hope you're well, Michelle. Thanks for watching. Pardon?
Me too, Michelle.
I hope you're well. I hope you're well, Michelle, and I'll see you in April when I come for part 2 of my teeth job. Eubank Miller, Frank spoke about, and he spoke about Trevor Bryan and Dubois for WBA regulars, trying to make that with Don King. Joe Joyce, WBO #1 contender. Anthony Yard looks like he's in position for light heavyweight world title, WBO. Basically, he's gone about his business quietly, Frank, hasn't he?
Yep, what he hasn't done, which obviously we know Eddie did, and this isn't Eddie bashing, this is observations about Eddie. He hasn't gone around shouting about fights that are almost there, 24 hours are going to be almost there. And that's what I've said previously, that if you're going to make a fight, you go away quietly and you make it, and you get all the pieces and parts in place. And that's what Warren's doing. And I think Warren strategically now is sensing there's not just a turn
in the tide.
In the tide. There's also people wearing a little bit, you know, it's like the Emperor's new clothes. So Eddie Hearn was a new kid on the block, and then he got this, you know, he started really helping British boxing and getting it onto the large arenas. And then he had a monopoly. And once he had a monopoly, he started to control how certain things happened. And everybody gets a little bit bored, don't they? And it became a bit stale. Frank's made a great comeback. And Eddie's just become a little bit tiresome now. We're all a little bit bored of him. And I think I continually go back to the Frank Warren, Bob Arum, and Eddie Hearn, you know, the Fury and Joshua announcements, and they all agreed, didn't they, that the deal was, and this is what Frank Warren said, the deal was that we won't announce anything. And I've seen all videos of him before Eddie started speaking about Joshua and Fury. He says nothing will be announced until all three of us know it's locked down, and then we'll make a joint announcement.
Yeah.
Eddie didn't listen. Eddie can't keep his mouth shut, can he? He can't stop talking. And he continually said, oh, it's almost there, I'm going to announce it shortly, blah, blah, blah. And the old dogs, Bob Arum and Frank Warren, stayed quiet. And that's exactly what Frank Warren's doing now. He's staying quiet. He's getting fights made. He's putting pieces in place. And then he makes the announcements. I mean, you know, we had Arthur and, you know, Yard. We had two of those fights. Those two guys boxed twice. And we've yet to see something as good as that from Matchroom in-house, haven't we?
Listen, mate, he put Lyndon Arthur and Yard together. He put Joyce and Dubois together. And listen, Dubois come again, and he was in position now for a world title.
Well, what you have to do, Russell, and you've said this yourself, you have to look at this weekend. It might be too late, Khan and Brook, but ultimately, what the common denominator of this fight being made finally was that Eddie Hearn was nothing to do with it. The fight got made. And we saw Williams and Eubank recently. The fight, that's a big fight. The fight got made. And there seems to be a common denominator right now with all these big domestic fights getting made. And there's no involvement from Matchroom. And I'll tell you why. Because fighters have big egos. But when you have a promoter who's got a bigger ego than anybody else in the building, he's not going to budge at all. If you've got an ego and you're a promoter, you're going to want everything your own way. But when you're dealing with two big names on both sides, like Fury, like Joshua, whatever, everybody has to give a little bit. And, you know, you'll always have an A side, but everybody has to make concessions. But Hearn's ego is so big, he won't make any concessions. And he's effectively spoiling now the fights that we want to see. He'll argue and he'll say he's given us the fights that we want to see, but not really. Even though it was a good trade fight between Jacobs and Ryder at the weekend, nobody was screaming for Ryder to fight Jacobs, were they?
No.
Nobody. It was a nice fight, but nobody wanted it. Nobody was bothered about it.
Nobody knows who they are, man in the street, does he?
No one knows at all, but everybody knows who Eubank war, Williams war, Khan and Brook is a big fight, albeit too late. And people want the big fights, and the big fights are starting to happen now that monopoly's gone and we're seeing other people rise up.
I was a bit disappointed to hear a lot of people not say anything about Ryder getting a hometown decision against Jacobs, because when John Ryder didn't get it his own way against Callum Smith, people were losing the shit and running around like headless chickens. I'm not going to say which YouTube channel or whatever, but because it suits, people are like, well, you know, he's had bad luck in the past, but that doesn't make it right, does it? Jacobs being robbed.
The level playing field, and it's whoever gets in there, dominates the fight, lands the most punches, and that or scores the most knockdowns or whatever. And that is ultimately how boxing should be judged. It's like the old saying that you've got to rip a title away from a champion. I hate that personally. It's like, who says that? When a champion steps into a ring, is a challenger, and his opponent is a challenger, and the belt effectively is vacant once two fighters get into a ring, and it's to be won, isn't it? The belt's to be won, and it should start at zero. All rounds should start at zero. There's no leaning towards a champion. So when people start saying stuff like that, it just gets really tired for me.
Okay. Going back to what we just spoke about there, I just want to mention a couple of things. What you touched on there is correct, I think. Dave Allen were offered a lot of money to fight Daniel Dubois. He never had a contract with Matchroom. I know this fact for a fact.
Uh-huh.
To be fair to Dave, it was probably a bit out of his depth being offered that. He was invited to a Warren show. He took his mates, they all went, they got VIP'd and all that. Whether he was starstruck or not, the first thing he did was ring Eddie Hearn and tell him, I've been offered this much. Instead of going and taking the fight, this is coming off the David Price good hiding. He was offered same money and other perks as well. He was offered, if he lost, they were going to do this for him and do that. It was all set out for him. He's got in touch with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn's gone, ask for this much. He's asked for that. Frank's gone, discarded him like rubbish. That's it. That boat's gone now. That's sailed. He'll never get over that, David Allen. He'll never get over it. Now, he didn't fight at weekend on Dennis's show. We'll come to that in the next 10 minutes. But the point I want to make is that's Hearn's ego regards Warren. So Dave missed out, Dubois fight. We never had Brooke Khan for 10 years because Eddie Hearn had Brooke, didn't he? And Brooke left Warren. Fury White, that's dragging its arse at the moment. Fury AJ would have done do it, never happened. But what's he hard? I can give you 25s. Now, we've had about 7, I think, or 8, something like that, in 12 years between them, both Warren and Hearn fights. It's not good enough. I don't know who's to blame out both of them. I'd probably say both of them, but maybe more Eddie than Frank, because Frank has offered olive branches, hasn't he? They were going to meet in a restaurant before the pandemic. Well, we have Zoom, don't we? The world don't need to see it. You can talk on your WhatsApp video. So I think maybe they're both to blame why the British boxing is in a state at the moment, because it is in a state. Yeah. But these promotion companies who've got in-house fighters, just put them on. Just put them on. Like, we'll come to that in a minute with Dennis and with Dave Allen and Cash Ali. Just put them on. But getting back to Brooke Khan and that, I think that Eddie balls that up from day one, in my opinion. And ego's got him weighing that, but I'm still going to watch it and I'm still going to tune in because Eddie Hills is not involved. And it's killing him all week. And the point I'm coming up to now is Conor Benn every day this week's been calling out the winner. And he's saying he's about legacy and that Brooke and Khan have got no left and blah, blah, blah. Well, why is he calling them out then if he's the up-and-comer and they're 10 years older than him? Why is he calling them out if they're short?
Because, as you've said, Eddie's got his hand up these guys' backsides and is controlling what they say. I mean, you mentioned Dave Allen. Never met Dave Allen, but Dave Allen didn't have loyalty to Eddie Hearn by ringing him up. He had blind loyalty to Eddie Hearn. And that is a really foolish thing to say. So when Dave Allen is possibly might be struggling for money in 5 years, 10 years' time, he's going to rue the day. Because guess what, Dave? If you give Eddie a ring in 5 years' time because you can't pay your mortgage, give him a ring and ask him if he'll sub you 100 grand because you're struggling, or give you a job as a pundit on whatever channel he's working on. Then it's not going to happen, mate. And I'm hoping that Dillian White's not doing the same thing. I really want to see.
Well, you can see it happening. It's in front of our eyeballs. We all know the Lee Purdy story about this is my new best friend and he lives near me. Well, where's Lee Purdy now and where's Eddie Hearn? Yeah, exactly. So we all know that story. But the point I want to make is, why do fighters feel they have to show loyalty to him when they don't have a contract with him?
I mean, I pause because I think it's one of those things what's like one of life's mysteries to me, because loyalty is a good thing. I like loyalty. You don't always have to have a contract with someone to be loyal, but you have to know that loyalty is going to be a two-way thing. It's like loyalty with friends. You know, I work for a business. I work for a really good business and they're a great team where I work. But I know that if that day ever comes that that business needs to make a decision that they no longer need Julian McGowan, it'll just be.
You've been there years, haven't you?
Yeah, but it'll just be a case of you get called in the office, and today's the day you get the envelope, because there's no loyalty in business. And
brown envelope, Julian, is it? A brown envelope.
It'll be full, mate. Don't worry about me. It'll be full. But that day would likely come, and that's that's no issue. And by the way, I wouldn't look at the business in a dark light. It's a great company to work for. What I'm saying is these people who I work for, the business people, it's owned by an investment banking company.
Yeah.
Eddie Hearn works for a business that is owned by an investment banking company. So there's no sentiment in business. So Dave, Julian, Eddie's not your mate, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what? You owe yourself first of all, and then you owe your loved ones to do the right thing. You've got such a short career in boxing. You've got to better make these decisions and make these decisions what are the right ones for you. And if Eddie Hearn truly is your friend, what you would have said is you'd have said to Frank Warren, Dave Allen would have said, that's a good number. I'm happy with it. I accept the fight. And then as a courtesy, you would have sent a note to Eddie Hearn and said, I signed a contract to fight Dubois. It's really life-changing money. And just for information, that's what I've done. It's just an FYI. That's what we call it. It's an FYI. And that's what he would have done. Dillian White will do the same thing. Dillian White will say, Eddie, if you really want what's best for me, then what's best for me is me winning the heavyweight
Do you
championship.
think that's why Dillian White's dragging his arse? Because he's got till this Saturday to sign, hasn't he?
I don't know. I would certainly think, even if he signs or not, he's been advised to delay it just to make them shit themselves, basically. But Fury won't shit. Bob Arum said, I'm not bothered. And Frank Warren said the same thing.
They'll have a plan B lined up, won't they?
Yeah, if you don't sign, there's a lot of fighters who will fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. Personally, I think Dillian White will sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well, we'll finish off on Dennis's show at the weekend that he didn't attend to because he was in Dubai for his Mrs. Sarah's 40th. So he stayed in Dubai. I'm just going to read out the show to you. Zane Clark debut against the Kid Norton 26. Perry Howe 3-1 against the Kid Norton 5. Matty Eppenstall debut against the 2-17 kid. Conor Dobney debut against the 3-52 kid. Zach Miller 7-0 against the 16-35 kid. Keenan Wainwright 6-1 against the 14-18 kid. Tommy Hodgson 3-0 against the 7-68 kid. Cash Ali headlining against the 2-1 kid. All the home fighters won 39-3-1 home against 44, 216-14. Not a belt in sight. Stadium empty, 220 tickets sold. Is that what they've got to work with in the area, around this area? Is that the best that matchmakers can come up with? Or have a lot of people walked from the sport? Or are people not coming into the sport? Or do we have to have white collars coming into the sport? I know that's a bit of a dig at Max, but I told Max to his face that people like Max are the problem in boxing. I like Max, but Max is not in shape. He's a 1-0 heavyweight now. And if he's badly advised, he could get his brain scrambled, couldn't he? This is why me and you said to him, Max, let's try and guide you a little bit away from this person, that person, if you want to do it. Because if you end up against the wrong person, you could end up talking like Scooby-Doo, couldn't he?
Yeah.
What do you think? Has Dennis got problems here with this? Because he's had 17 shows in a year, and they're all like this. And that Fight Zone is not Free Sports, it's Fight Zone now. Fight Zone's now free now. Is that going downhill? What's going on here? Dennis would have never put this out years ago. I mean, if he missed this show, the last time he missed a show was Clinton Woods defending his world title in UK. Dennis went out with Hatton in America. I know that didn't go down too well, but so in 25 years, missed 2 shows now. Dennis wouldn't have put this out in his pomp. But is this the best that they can all offer now? Because I'm looking at these other shows. I'm looking at Dean White's show, looking at one Steffi Bull's putting on, Josh Whale, and they're all very similar, or some are a bit worse than this. What's fucking going on here? The product's watered down, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much I could say about that. And we've said before that the likes of Dennis and these other guys in these small shows, they don't have an easy time of it, but they don't help themselves either because ultimately, I believe in quality over quantity. Now, what I think 5 or 6 fights makes a good show as long as those are good fights. If we have a central area title fight, we maybe have an English title fight, head in the bill, and we have some good quality kids on there. I've got no issue with someone fighting someone 12 and 18 or someone 5 and 20, you know. It's one of those. I remember Sykes once boxed a kid who was 0 and 11, and it was really awful, you know. It was like, God, I just says, get him out of there really quick. I said, don't drag this one on, and he did. And that's a former ABA champion. But what I have an issue with, and I've said this before, is I think it's too many fights on those shows. My biggest issue is a kid who's 0 and 27.
This kid here has just been beat at weekend, 0 and 27
Yeah,
now.
I don't know who it is. I don't know the kid. And
it's a foreign kid. And I'll tell you his name. I'll tell you his name. Hang on a minute. His name is Gennady Krojewski. Probably something like what Max has just been in with.
I mean, debutants, certainly ones who haven't got like a big amateur pedigree or a lot of experience. I understand they might want an easy fight, but a kid who's 0 and 27 shouldn't be in boxing. He shouldn't be licensed. It's like it's the lowest form of boxing. And then
what about Dale Harrismith, 3 and 53? Hadn't had a win in 12 or something.
What's going to happen though when one of these kids eventually gets hurt? What's going to happen? Who's responsible? And this is what we said about the border control. Okay, you're not just responsible for the organization of boxing, and you're responsible for licensing, and you're responsible for sanctioning fights. Okay, no matter what a promoter puts on, you are the person who sanctioned these fights, and you're sanctioning in some instances good pedigree kids against absolute punching bags, human punching bags. And that's not being disrespectful to the human punching bags, because that's an awful term for me to use. These are kids who are brave men who are doing an honorable thing to earn money, because that, maybe using the fists or using the head to take shots is the only chance they've got. But it's dreadful. These people, it needs trimming down. Boxing needs trimming down. You can't have a kid who's an unbeaten elite amateur fighting a kid who's lost 30 fights or something and not won any. It's absolutely awful. And that is why there's 220 tickets being sold, actually, because, you know, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, etc. If you continually go to these shows, after a while, what happens is, you know, you might be a casual, what we call the casual. But after a while, you get a little bit clued up, don't you? You get used to the format. And then you're watching the away fight and you're going, oh, we saw him last time. He got beat by so-and-so. And we've seen him he's been on this Dennis's show 5 times now, this kid. He's useless. And you start to realize that the product that you're getting is really, really poor.
I can tell you kids that have been on 8 times out of 17 shows, if I go through all that. Same old people wheeled out, and these are opponents who have not had a win. Same old, and all they're doing is clocking losses up. Who's signing off on these fights?
The border control. So ultimately, well, they might not be licensing them. So obviously they didn't license Max. Max got licensed by, you know, was it Estonia? I can't, Luxembourg, whoever it was. Max got licensed by another body. But ultimately, the border control is signing off on these fights. So these officials are seeing the same old guys on the shows every single time, and they're either incompetent or they're just putting no effort in whatsoever. They don't even put a shift in there. And I just find it distasteful, if I'm being completely honest. It's like imagine, look, I know we have the FA Cup, and I don't watch football, it's not my sport, but we have the FA Cup, and you get the non-league guys come up against Chelsea, and that's like the World Cup final, isn't it? They come up against these celebrities and these stars, and it's something that can tell the kids. But they're not getting hit in the head, are they?
No.
We're happy for guys, aren't we, to it's like I was saying to my mate the other day, we were talking about this, and we're talking about how boxing now is, the bar's very, very low for boxers, for coaches, for officials. The bar is very, very low. And I said to my mate, I says, it's like people are entitled to do what they want for a living, but we have a duty of care, don't we, as people involved in boxing, and the Board of Control have a duty of care to make sure it's done sensibly. So, for example, they wouldn't let me go in a Formula 1 car and go around.
Because you've not done Formula 3, have you? Formula 2. And
exactly, because I've not gone up there. And if they let me do that, then so it's up to you what you do. Let's say I was a millionaire and I decided to go around the track. It's up to you. No, I'm incompetent. I can't perform at that level. And they certainly wouldn't let me do that if there were other people on the track because it's dangerous. But we're allowing fighters who are full-time workers, part-time fighters, often out of shape, often giving weight away, losing whatever. But we're allowing them to fight these good kids and get pounded for 4 rounds or 6 rounds, and we're letting it happen. And I think the Board of Control have a duty of care. And I also think that boxing managers need to be more open with fighters and be more honest with them and say, look, you're 6-0 now. Those kids you beat, they're pretty poor level now. Let's step you up, because you just, what do they say? You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And they're just fooling the fighters. They're giving them a false sense of security. The away fighters are getting beat up. The agents are getting a fucking fortune. These agents are taking 30, 40, 50% cuts off these international boxers. They're getting treated like shit. And everybody's making money and everybody's happy, but some people are getting the brains bashed in. And I always thought sport was supposed to be a level playing field, but sport's also supposed to be competitive, isn't it? And that's why people were so enthusiastic about Eubank and Williams, because it was viewed as being a competitive fight. And people just want to see competitive fights. And those shows, and it's not digging Dennis out, that they're really low level stuff, and I definitely wouldn't take one of my kids to see that.
Yeah, I won't myself, mate.
And I like Dennis. I've met him before. I like him.
Dennis was a good night out, and I don't think Dennis was running show. I think we've got other people involved. Some of these fights, I'd be like, nah, I don't believe Dennis has made that fight. I believe that's might be why he stayed in Dubai. He looked at it and thought, oh, how could I face that? Russell will terrorise me over this lot. But the one terrorising, it's all right for me to sit with Dennis and say, look at that show they've put on. I hope you're going to do a video on that. Well, it's his turn now, isn't it? So
the one thing I will say, Russell, the one advantage of a show like that is you could walk in and you could sit where you want, couldn't you? Get a good
yeah. Best fight on there with Keenan Wayne, right? He looked like he win a good fight, Keenan, and that should have been.
You sometimes get these surprises, don't you? I've been to York Hall and places like that with Mally McIver and stuff, and first guy I worked with, and see some fucking great fights on these shows, but they've got to be competitive, haven't they? Yeah. It's just there's something what's become, and I've had fighters who have done this. There's something what's become really boring now about guys getting to 15-0 and they haven't actually boxed anybody whatsoever. It's become boring to the point that if you give me a show now, I'll not only tell you the winner is, but I'll fill out the scorecard as well.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, listen, I know you've got to pick your lad up at 7, haven't you?
It's fine. Yeah. I'm fine.
I'm going to do competition now. You probably know answers to this, so don't say it. Right, the competition that I was on about earlier. I'm going to get this signed for you by the Cobra from Nottingham, but he's in Spain at the moment at his villa. But I think he'll probably be back when kids return back to school. And I'm in London at the beginning of next week. But on way back, I'm going to call it Clinton's and get that one signed. And I'll call it the Cobras and get that one signed. And so porkycorner@mail.com is the email. And the question is, who did Carl Froch defeat in his first title fight in his career? That's title, I've just said there. So that could be any title. Who did he defeat in his first title fight in his career? porkycorner@mail.com. Leave your phone number on it as well. That's part of the deal. And what I'll do, when I get it signed, I'll get a picture of him signing it, and you can keep that for your authenticity. And you can, if your mates come round to your house and you put it in a glass cage or whatever, or you just have it in the house, they'll say, oh, that's wrote that. Well, you can say no, because we've got the photo. So you need your phone number. Send me your phone number, and I'll WhatsApp photo you it when I go get it signed. So it's who did Carl Froch beat in his first title fight? porkycorner@mail.com. That's about it, Julian. We've covered everything. How are you? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm just thinking about Carl Froch, actually. And
what do you think to his career?
I thought, well, it was a modern day Rocky Marciano, wasn't it? And I was just thinking about his career actually a while ago when you mentioned him, and I wondered what he thought about all these fighters now jumping.
I know, but I'm not going to say. But I know.
I just wonder because it was a fighting man, wasn't it? I know you get a lot of stick. Listen, if you love a fight, you love a fighter. I love Ray Leonard. You can't say anything bad about Ray Leonard. I don't care what.
Oh, and if you mean jumping the levels, well, Carl thinks that you should go to traditional route and learn your craft. And he had loads of defences at British, won it outright. He had all them Commonwealth defences, and he was learning his craft. You know, Robin Reed, Brian McGee, who went on to win a world title. Reed had won a WBC, and it's actually 23 years today that Robin Reed fought Carl Zaghi and lost in a split, and people said he won, didn't they? So he learned his craft, and Mick Hennessy likes to take his fighters that way, you know, like Huey, Tyson, people like that. And I think that nowadays we have like your Benns, and Johnny Fisher's saying, I want to go the Conor Benn route and that. So he's not going to go British level. They're going to try pick a trinket up, and they're going the money routes, aren't they? But is that what you were trying to say? What he thinks about that?
Yeah, I just think that, and I'm a firm believer, right? First of all, you got to come out of boxing with, you know, that working between your ears. That's got to work. Yeah. So people don't remember. Well, say people remember the Warriors, but they don't remember when fighters are pissing blood for a week after a fight and all that kind of stuff. So I get that element of it, but I just think that ultimately money gets spent, doesn't it? And I think it must be just for someone like Carl Froch to look back on his career, and there was nobody he didn't fight, was there? He didn't fight who he wanted to. I mean, obviously the Carl Zaghi fight the timings wasn't quite right there, but he probably looks back and said, you know what? I've got no regrets whatsoever.
None.
And that, if you can turn around and say, you know what? I had a great career and I had no regrets. And to a different extent, I always think of Colin Jones and Tony Simpson and guys like that. But I think of, and to some extent, Luke Campbell, but I think of Colin Jones, and I think Colin Jones fought for the world title 3 times. He fought Milt McCrory twice, and then Don Curry. He fought the absolute best welterweights in the world, and he could hold his head high thinking, you know what, I was never world champion, but I got beaten by the absolute best. And then I wonder if these guys who win these interim belts and these regular belts and they retire, I wonder if they have those moments where they just look in the mirror and say, but you had a manufactured career, really. I'm not knocking them, by the way. I'm just wondering, you know, like Tony Simpson fought Marvin Hagler, didn't he? I mean, absolutely just what a fantastic, I mean, obviously I know he fought Frank Tate and Dennis Andrews later on, but he fought the absolute best middleweight king in the world, didn't he? And I just think there's some dignity in that. And that's why when you talk about Bruce Woodcock walking into the working men's club and people stood up clapping.
Tumbler. He ended up landlord years after that. And
that's why I just think there's so much boxing's about, you know, it's about a load of different
things.
They
get up and the old guys in there, make the sons get up, stand, and clap like that.
Yeah, and
every time he walked in.
I just think there's just something fantastic about that, and there's something very old school about, you know, you see him over there, you know, like Sykes, you see him over there as a British champion, you see him over there. He fought Marvin Hagler, and he got beat, but he fought the great Marvin Hagler. I just think that must be just so brilliant to look back on your career and say, you know what, I wasn't the best, but I fought the best, and I can at least look in the mirror and say, I gave it 100%. And
what can Conor Benn do with his career? People will say, you see him there, he didn't fight this person, he didn't fight that person, he swerved him. Look at him getting in his Aston Martin or whatever car he's got. Does Conor Benn care about legacy?
And that's the problem, and I'll get hammered for this one. I say what I think. I always think there was a big black mark against Ricky Hatton by the fact he just avoided Junior Witter, and he did.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
He absolutely avoided him like the plague.
Witter would have turned him on his head, wouldn't he?
100%. And I said this at the time. I like Ricky, and I liked he had a great career. But Junior Witter at one point was rampant. I remember it was a Bagatelle where they knocked out a really good European in 2. and he was knocking everybody out. He had about 14 back-to-back knockouts, and he was since he lost to Judah, and he was absolutely on fire. And he had a good chin, did Witter. You know, he gave Judah 12 rounds at short notice. And I remember, you know, that after Hatton, before he fought McGee, he was going to fight McGee and then Witter. And he showed, didn't he, against a sharp southpaw in McGee, he got dropped. And then McGee kind of mysteriously eased off the pedal. It was a bit of a weird fight, was that. And then I remember afterwards, they were promised that Warren said, I promise it, I'm going to deliver it. And Hatton absolutely avoided that fight like the plague. He became a multi-weight world champion and a multi-millionaire. But I always felt that Junior Witter was everything that was wrong with boxing, because he was a massively talented fighter. He was quiet. He was unassuming. He didn't have an outspoken personality, and he won everything there was to win. And then he ended up on Prize Fighter, not fighting for great money. And I just thought it was an indication of what was to come for me, was Witter and Hatton. I know boxing's always been a popularity contest, but generally, if you're good enough, you did get your opportunity. And people say, well, Witter got his opportunity, but he didn't really. He didn't get the big domestic dream fight that would have filled out any stadium.
He'd have beat Hatton, I felt. And I thought Ricky Hatton were overrated, to be honest, mate. I did.
Junior Witter would have absolutely schooled him, and so many reasons. I mean, first of all, it was a switch hitter. It was powerful. It was fit. It was durable. It was all wrong for Ricky Hatton stylistically. And at that time, Witter was rampant. I think Hatton improved, you know, and went on to have that great win over Costa Zoo. But from a promotional managerial point of view, Hatton's career was a mastermind because of the money he earned for those two huge fights. But I just think, yeah, back to my point, I think it showed really where boxing was going, because you had the guy who was avoided massively, who ended up fighting for a world title when he was a little bit past his best, I thought. I thought when Witter ended up winning the world title, he was kind of losing that form and losing things a little bit. And then Hatton obviously earned an absolute fortune and became the media darling, and everybody loved him. And it was all what was wrong with boxing, because it's not always a case of being good enough, is it? It's just a case of being popular. And had Junior Witter liked a pint of beer and had the old faithful and not being born in Bradford, but actually being like Sykes was born.
I never really bought into all that, you know. I just think that Hatton always went out anyway, but I never bought into all that boy next door and one at lads thing. I think it was just
I didn't.
At that time when Ricky Hatton burst on scene, it were all lads mags and people getting pissed and having a bit of charm in it. It was just good timing, but I never bought into all that, mate. Because if we did buy into it, he'd always be able to sell loads of tickets. Well, he's looking at fighting Barrera, isn't he? But I don't think that'll happen, me, because he was supposed to fight Robin Reed, and they had a deal ready, and that all fell through. And there were a lot of people, some people lost the money trying to put him money up for arenas and stuff like that, and he changed his mind. So whether he's been out and had a good night and then started saying, yeah, I'll fight him, and when it comes to actually fighting and getting in shape, because he looks like a little hippo at the moment, like a little sumo wrestler. So I don't think he'll want to get back in ring me against Pereira. I don't know, but you don't know. Some people have massive egos, don't they?
Yeah, people like to be around, and maybe Hatton wants the discipline of getting in shape because it makes him feel good about himself. But it's certainly not. That's not something I want to see, by the way. I thought it was painful, his last fight. That was quite
against Senchenko.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I thought the poetic brutality and irony of that fight was getting knocked out by the signature punch that made a career for Hatton.
That made him, that left over.
Yeah, and I thought there was just something so ironic and kind of dark about that, but it shows the brutality of boxing. So just the way he just like went down and he just couldn't get up, and it was such a it was hard to watch. So Ricky, we don't want to see you again. Definitely not in an exhibition. Be safe, look after yourself. Keep sober. I hope you're battling your demons, but we definitely don't want to see you again in a ring. But focus on your son, focus on your son's career. But again, I mean, you spoke to Junior Witter a while ago, didn't you? I've not seen him for a few years. Used to go over to Sykes and spar a few times, and they don't have time to have a good chat. But if you do see him, because I know you sometimes speak to Junior.
He's a nice guy. We're living in Cantley in Doncaster at one point.
Right. Give him my regards because he was absolutely a top world-class fighter on his best night.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I will. Now listen. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure. Hope you're well. I'm going to be here now. It's what, 7:05. I'll probably be here well 8. Bit of chest and triceps, and then I'm going home to bed. It's been a long day today for me.
I trained last night, mate, and then like I said, I did the pads this morning with my mate. I mean, me on the pads is embarrassing now. It really is. But yeah, I did the back of my bicep, my back of my triceps last night, and I did 6 twos on the pads this morning. You know, I've got a bit of space in the garage in a bag, so Stuart just came and we just gave each other 6 twos, and it's like it makes me realize I'm 50, mate. I'm not 30, but you got to keep in shape, Russell, haven't you? You like training, you like doing your thing.
I do now. I've said I can do some light weights and that now. I've had camera don't I? Kind of so you can start doing light weights and take your dog out. But I'll take your dog out anyway, won't I? Yeah, but yeah, so you've got to get back there.
Healthy body, healthy mind.
Weak as a kitten at the moment.
It's you'll get back to it, mate, and you just get back into a routine. And
I'm doing chest with just bar.
I'm just gonna say, like, two polos on a matchstick.
No, just not even collars on, just bar, just range of motion in it at first. Because I haven't done it since September.
It is range of motion, and it's just getting back into it, isn't it? It takes time, muscle memory, and once it kicks in, you'll be absolutely fine.
Mickey Theo said, just do it with bar. It doesn't matter what you put on, as long as you do the thing correctly. I'll get it back up to 80 kilo or whatever, you know. It just takes time. It'll take a few months, but I've had just a life-saving operation. I've had a nightmare for 4.5 months.
It's massive, mate. It's massive. Recovery takes a long time. You're lucky to be here. Never mind talking about training.
I'm lucky to be here. Been a nightmare, but we all get through. Don't listen. It's not my first rodeo. I've been in. I should call myself relentless. Actually, after all things I've been through in my life. I mean, Eddie Hearn says he's relentless, but the only blip in his life was when Frampton left him. That's the only time I ever saw a chink in his armour. But other than that, I'm all right. I'm tough as old boots. Coal miner's son, aren't I, Julian?
Same here, mate. Same here. I'm not saying I'm as tough as old boots, but yeah.
I'll let you go get Kelsey then.
All right, mate. Thanks, Russell.
Listen, thanks for coming on. You're a gentleman. You take care.
Anytime. You too, mate.
Peace out.
Cheers,
bye-bye. That was Julian. Nice to have him on. Hope he's all right. That's about it, really. I think I've seen Junior Witter about 4 times in my life. I don't know where he got that from. But he's a nice kid, Junior Witter. I just think that it's sad that somebody of that talent ain't sat there with loads of money. So I thought he was a really good fighter, but he had an awful style to overcome, didn't he? But I wish him all the best. I wish Max all the best. I know you're watching, Max. Ignore all them trolls. Ignore them and do your own thing. All right? Listen to Julian and he'll guide you. I can't guide you, Max, because you're your own man, but I can give you a bit of advice. But I'm not a boxing guru, but I can give you advice, Max. Probably get you padded out to 5-0. Okie dokie. 7:10. Let's see if I can get this up, and then they can get the other one out. Might get them both out from 8:30 to 9:15, and then this one will be 9:15 onwards. So might just squeak 2 out tonight. That's 27 for a month. So I've got 2 more members and 1 more YouTube. Target it for a month, and we're only on 15th of Feb. I don't think you lot could cope from 17th onwards, could you, to end of month? We are your Porky Fix. So don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment. All right, 39% of you who watched my videos yesterday do not subscribe. So hit the subscribe button, give your Uncle Porky a bit of respect. And remember, when the live chat goes on, hit the like button. that too shows respect, because a lot of time and effort was into these. All right. I am currently freezing my bollocks off. I could put heater on now. Oh, it's fucking turn on that wall. So that's about it, really. All right. So have a good Tuesday evening. Peace out.